So as I outlined in a previous video, there's a bit of a problem in the NBA at the moment. Well, there are a few, but the one I'm referencing here is that there simply haven't been any trades in the NBA so far this season. Well, if there have been since the recording of this video, I apologize. I'm going out of town and had to make this video a few days before it was actually released. But anyway, player movement and NBA trades is a big driving force in the interest of the league as a whole, and is one of the main reasons that many people follow the NBA. I can personally relate to this because I'm one of those people, as you can tell by a lot of my content on this channel being related to trades and or off-season player movement. Now, one of the issues and reasons why this is the case is that NBA player salaries are just so large now. With the rising salary cap over the last few years, and most notably the huge jump in the summer of 2016, it isn't uncommon to now see players making $30 to $35+ million a year. And this is an issue when it comes to making a trade because the league necessitates that under most circumstances, a team has to take on between 75 to 125% of the salaries that they're sending out in a given trade. It's much more nuanced than that, but for the purposes of this video, the idea is that you have to match salaries pretty closely to make it work in the NBA, which when you're dealing with such big contract numbers can be an issue. So why am I talking about this now? Well, because I recently heard an interesting proposal that would help make it much easier for teams to make deals, specifically when dealing with high salary players. Now, to be clear, again, this idea is not my own, but my thoughts around it are. So a few days ago, I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast, and he proposed a rule change that only forced NBA teams to match 50% of incoming salaries in a trade, regardless of the circumstances, with the idea being that it would make it easier to make trades specifically for stars, which would in turn drive more fan interest. Now, this is interesting for a few reasons, and the first is just that I'm of the opinion that more trades equals more interest in the NBA, which is better for everyone involved. And there's no doubt that this kind of rule change would make it easier for players to be traded in a variety of different circumstances. So it allows for more player movement in both directions, not just stars being added to contenders, but to make salary dumps more feasible. All trades around the NBA would be made easier by not having to so closely match salaries. Just think about it, whether you've watched my NBA Trade Machine videos or you just tried to go and make a trade yourself, how many times have you thought, man, this would be a really good fit, but this team just doesn't have the salaries to make it work? And there's plenty of teams like that around the league right now. Teams like the Celtics, teams like the Rockets. I talked about that in the other trade video that I referenced in the beginning of this video. A lot of teams just don't have the salaries to make it work to bring in players, and it doesn't seem like it would be that big of a difference just changing this percentage, but when you really go around the league and try and make trades work, this would be a huge difference maker. Just think about some of the guys around the league that this would make it so much easier to make a trade for. Chris Paul is the first name that comes to mind. There's a reason that he was on a list in which I said he was one of the most untradeable players in the entire league just based off of his salary. And then him and Russell Westbrook, who also made that list, were both traded for each other because they're one of the few players around the league that can actually match their salaries one for one. Teams like the Timberwolves and other teams around the league that need a point guard and would be interested in a Chris Paul trade would be able to make that move much easier if they only had to match half of his over $30 million in salary. And it's a similar story for players like Kevin Love and Blake Griffin, who have recently been featured in Trade Machine videos as well. It's not just about the long-term salary, but it's about matching what they are at this season, and there'd be a lot more teams interested in making deals for those two players as well as Paul, as well as a lot of other guys around the league, if they just didn't have to match so much money. So all of these are good things. Like, just think about how many other moves the Lakers could possibly make than that they aren't able to right now simply because they just don't have the salaries to make it work. It just makes things so much less complicated, which again is good for fan interest, because the easier it is for fans to follow trades as well as make their own, the more interested they're going to be in the league without having to look up all these different rules on how to actually make it work. So those are all the reasons why this would be a really good thing, in my opinion. It makes trades easier. You don't need huge expiring contracts to make trades for stars, and it would increase fan interest. However, there are some reasons why I could potentially see this being a bad thing. Even though I would love to see more trades because it's more interesting, that isn't necessarily a good thing for most players in the NBA. It's not all just stars out there. There's role players as well that would be traded a lot more often, and just in general, players around the league would be traded more often if it was easier to make moves, which the players are not going to be in favor of most of the time, unless they really want to go to a specific destination, like Anthony Davis really wanting to go to the Lakers. players don't generally want to be traded out of where they are unless it's on a bad team going to a contender. But in general, this would make players even more anxious about the possibility that they could be moved at any moment because it'd be a lot easier to do so. And on the other hand, it does give bigger market teams even more of an advantage over smaller market teams because they would be more willing to take on bigger contracts. Because if they're only sending out 50% of a salary that they're taking back, they're going to be continually taking on more and more and more payroll to add to their team in these kinds of circumstances, and there won't be as much of an even exchange in terms of salaries. And smaller market teams in general wouldn't be as willing to spend a ton of money and go over the luxury tax and things like that as bigger market teams would, so that would put them at a bit of a disadvantage. And on top of that, it makes the league even less stable from a player movement standpoint. And as much as I love the player movement and as much as I loved this past offseason in terms of just all the craziness and all the news, and I love all these trades, for some people that's just not what they find interesting, and they're kind of over all these players changing teams all the time. And again, this would make it easier for that to be the case. So for some people, it's a huge negative, exactly what this thing and this potential rule change is trying to fix in terms of making trades easier. That's a big negative for some people. And then on top of that, wouldn't this just create a league in which teams like the Lakers and Celtics have all the good players because they're able to take on these big contracts for some role players? If someone just wanted to get rid of Chris Paul or someone just wanted to get rid of Kevin Love, then these teams would take them on, and then suddenly it's just the Lakers and the Celtics being really good all the time, and there's not as much parity. Again, going back to that smaller market disadvantage point that I made earlier. Now, yes, I will say that some of these concerns are certainly valid, but no rule change or anything like that is necessarily going to be perfect. And there's already things in place in the league, for example, the luxury tax and most specifically the repeater tax, that make it less likely that this is going to be any kind of huge advantage for bigger market teams. And just in general, it's going to benefit savvier front offices that are going to know how to take advantage of it, more so than just having more money to spend on big time players. And just to further counter the point that this rule change would be too much of an advantage for the Lakers and Celtics of the world, just think about this. Let's just say that for this season, the Lakers wanted to send out half their roster to add Chris Paul to their dynamic duo of LeBron James and Anthony Davis. This scenario is unlikely, but let's just say hypothetically this new 50% rule was implemented tomorrow, and it allowed for more moves like this in which contending teams add high salaried veterans that other teams just want to get rid of. Well, after that move, depending on some other circumstances surrounding their offseason, they'd put themselves at over $140 million in salary for next season, assuming they re-sign AD, well into the luxury tax and in danger of putting them there for multiple seasons in a row, getting them into the costly repeater tax territory that gets enormously expensive even for the most wealthy of franchises. Sure, that would add to their star power this season and increase their chances of an immediate championship, assuming they could fill out their lost depth with buyout players, but they would be under a tremendous amount of financial strain moving forward. Again, that scenario is unlikely, but it's just one example of how the other measures already in place to limit the advantages of bigger market teams as it relates to how much money they can spend can make this 75 to 125% salary matching rule a bit redundant in that area. Not only that, but this would also add that much more risk to moves similar to the Paul to the Lakers one. It would seem that this change would most often result in deals just like that, where a team dumps some mid-level contracts for a high-salaried player, but if they whiff on the deal, then they'd be on the hook for that salary in the long term, thus putting them in a pretty poor long-term place financially as punishment. So overall, I would love to see this implemented. I don't think it will be. I don't think it's anything that's actually under consideration, but I thought it was an interesting idea because, again, any kind of way to increase the number of trades that are happening in a given NBA season, in my opinion, is a positive thing because it drives fan interest, specifically around this time of year when people are still really invested in football. Nobody really cares that much about the NBA right now except for really hardcore NBA fans until we get closer to the trade deadline and those rumors start to heat up, and then we get to the postseason. That's when fan interest really picks up. But if this was the case and players could really be traded at any point, much easier than they could be now, we would have been talking about a Chris Paul trade from the minute he got to Oklahoma City. Maybe he never even would have ended up there, and he would have ended up on a different team directly from Houston. There's just so many possibilities here, and again, I think the positives far outweigh the negatives. I can understand some concerns, but for me, I would love to see this implemented tomorrow. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, I want to reiterate, like I said in the beginning, I'm not taking credit for this idea in any way. It was just an interesting idea that I heard, and I'm giving full credit to Bill Simmons and to the podcast team for the idea, but all the other thoughts around it are 100% my own. But again, I thank you all so much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.